The flashing cameras lit up the night like 1,000 tiny suns, but Noah Kensington barely blinked. On the surface, he looked like every headline said, Hollywood's golden boy star of a record-breaking blockbuster heir to the powerful Kensington legacy. At 35, he was everything the public envied and adored. But under the tuxedo, under the charm, something felt hollow. As he stepped onto the red carpet outside the Chinese theater, cheers erupted. Noah. Over here. Noah. Who are you wearing? Is Alexandra with you tonight? He smiled. He always did. The Kensington smile. Practiced. Perfect. Behind the cameras, Miranda, his longtime publicist, leaned in and whispered, Remember Charity Project Buzz and no personal surprises tonight. Noah nodded automatically. He had played this role for so long he could hit the marks in his sleep, say the right words, shake the right hands, be the man his family, the press, and the studios expected. 2 hours later, the party was still raging, but Noah was already at home. His Malibu mansion stood silent and sprawling, perched above the ocean, with 6 bedrooms, a grand piano he never played, and a wall of awards that meant less and less each year. He pulled off his tie, dropped it on the marble counter, and finally breathed. From the kitchen came a voice that grounded him instantly. Mr. Kensington, I didn't expect you back so early. Amina Blake, his private chef. Warm skin, steady eyes, hands that created comfort from spices and memory. She wore a simple apron, hair tied back, sleeves rolled. A stark contrast to the glittering world he just escaped. Noah stepped closer. The party was loud, empty. You're still here, just finishing prep for tomorrow. I made that soup you liked, if you're hungry. Noah exhaled a small smile, touching his lips. For the first time all evening, it was real. I'm starving. And just like that, in a kitchen bathed in quiet light, his world shifted again. I'm starving. And just like that, in a kitchen bathed in quiet light, his world shifted again. What started as a simple bowl of soup would become the beginning of something neither of them dared to name. Not yet. But it was already taking root in stolen glances, shared silences, and the comfort of being seen. The soup was warm, rich with spice and memory, and it hit Noah like something he didn't know he'd been missing. Comfort, sincerity. Not the carefully curated kind from industry parties, but something real, something Amina brought into every room without even trying. How was the premiere? She asked, leaning casually against the kitchen island. Like all the others, he murmured, spoon halfway to his mouth. People pretending to care about art when really they're just there to be seen. She didn't laugh, didn't flatter him. She just nodded like someone who understood. And she did, more than he expected. I get that, she said quietly. In restaurants sometimes I cook for people who never even looked at the plate. All they cared about was the price tag on the menu. Noah looked at her, then not just glanced, but looked. There was a calm pride in her voice, the kind that came from building something out of nothing. He knew she'd worked in elite kitchens before choosing private work. What he hadn't known was how much she had sacrificed to stand where she did. You ever think about opening your own place, he asked. Her eyes flickered. All the time. But dreams take time, and money, and belief. There was something unspoken in her tone, a weight she carried alone. Noah knew that look. He wore it himself behind the cameras. You know, he said slowly, you're probably the only person in my life who doesn't want something from me. Amina smiled, soft and unreadable. Maybe I just haven't asked yet. Their eyes met, just for a second. But in that second, something undeniable passed between them. Their eyes met, just for a second. But in that second, something undeniable passed between them. What neither of them realized was that this quiet connection would soon lead to the loudest storm of their lives. It started with the smallest moments. A bowl of soup shared after midnight. The way their hands brushed when passing ingredients in the kitchen. The way Amina didn't flinch when Noah talked about feeling hollow inside the life everyone else wanted. One night, while chopping herbs side by side, Noah joked about his role in a film where he played a chef. I had to use a hand double, he laughed, because apparently I hold knives like a toddler. Amina smirked. I remember. You were holding it like a paintbrush. That laugh, his real laugh, escaped before he could stop it. Deep, unfiltered. The kind of laugh that had nothing to do with cameras or red carpets. After that, things shifted. One evening, the rain came hard against the windows, a rare Malibu storm. Amina had stayed late prepping, and the roads were too slick to drive. Noah offered the guest room, but they never made it there. They stayed up talking about books, about grief, about the weight of legacy, and the freedom of being ordinary. Somewhere between his second glass of wine and her soft humming to a jazz record, something unspoken cracked open. I shouldn't, she whispered as his hand touched hers. I know, he said, but neither of them pulled away. And when they kissed, it wasn't wild or reckless, it was careful, earnest, like two people searching for something steady in a world spinning too fast. That night they crossed a line they couldn't uncross. And in the quiet after, when Amina rested her head on his chest and he held her like she was the first real thing he'd touched in years, Noah knew. This wasn't a fling. It was the beginning of a secret that could destroy everything. What they didn't realize yet was that secrets this powerful never stay buried for long. They thought they were being careful. Late night meetings, unspoken rules, no pictures, no trace. But secrets, especially the beautiful ones, have a way of slipping through the cracks. One morning, Amina arrived at the mansion early to prep for Noah's press day. She was wearing a loose blouse, barely showing the curve that had begun to form in her lower belly. Maria, the housekeeper, gave her a knowing glance. You're glowing, she said gently. Amina offered a small smile. She hadn't told anyone, not yet, not even Noah. That afternoon, everything unraveled. Somewhere. Maybe a hotel valet, maybe a long lens photographer hiding in the shadows, caught a shot of Noah kissing Amina goodbye on the steps of his home. The image was blurry, but not enough to deny. By evening, the tabloids exploded. Noah Kensington's secret romance with his private chef. Scandal in the Kensington estate. Is Hollywood's golden boy having a workplace affair? Noah's phone buzzed nonstop. His agent, his mother, studio reps, PR crisis teams. And then James showed up. He didn't knock. He never did. Standing in Noah's kitchen, James looked at Amina like she was a stain on the marble countertops. This is why you left the gala early, for her. Noah's jaw clenched. Watch your tone. She works for you, James snapped. This isn't love. It's a liability. And then Eleanor called. You need to release a statement. Deny. Distance. The Kensington name cannot be dragged through the mud by a help. Those words struck harder than the headlines. Amina stood silent in the corner, her hands trembling, eyes dry but burning. It wasn't just the racism. It was the coldness, the assumption that she didn't matter, that she could be erased with a single press release. Noah refused. And just like that, the real war began, not just with the media, but with the family that had always controlled the narrative. What none of them realized was that this story would no longer be told on their terms, because Amina had her own voice now and a life growing inside her. For days, Noah stayed quiet. His team begged him to release a statement. Call it a misunderstanding, they said. Say she's a friend. Say nothing serious. But silence wasn't protection. Amina had become the media's newest obsession and target. They picked apart her background, her education, her choice to be a private chef. Ambitious cook seduces Hollywood heir, one headline read. Another called her opportunistic, calculated. They never said black, but every image, every insinuation, screamed it. Noah watched it all with growing rage and guilt. He couldn't sleep. Not while Amina was suffering in silence, shielding herself from the world he had brought down on her. One night she tried to smile through it. This'll blow over. No, he said, voice low. It won't. Not unless I stop pretending. And so he did something no Kensington had ever done before. He booked a live interview. At the studio, his publicist nearly begged. No improvising, no declarations, just damage control. But when the lights went on and the camera started rolling, Noah Kensington did the exact opposite. I love her, he said clearly. Her name is Amina Blake. She's not a scandal. She's the most grounded, brilliant, honest person I've ever met. The room went still. We didn't plan this, he continued, voice firm, but we're expecting a child. And I won't pretend this isn't the best thing that's ever happened to me. Across town, Amina stood in her tiny apartment, hand resting over her belly, eyes full. Because for the first time, someone didn't just love her in private, he chose her in public. But what neither of them could predict was how the world and Noah's powerful family would retaliate next. The backlash was instant. Support poured in from fans, yes, but so did cruelty. Social media turned brutal. Paparazzi camped outside Noah's mansion, and Amina couldn't step outside without whispered judgments or camera flashes, so they disappeared. Not in shame, not in fear, but in defiance. Noah flew her to a house he'd bought under a different name, years ago, nestled on the Oregon coast, where the ocean roared louder than any headline. It wasn't grand like Malibu, but it was safe, quiet, the kind of quiet that heals. The first few days, Amina slept a lot. Noah cooked for her badly, burned toast over salted eggs, but she smiled anyway. They took long walks on the beach, talked about everything and nothing. And at night, as the fire crackled, they'd lie on the worn-out couch, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. I still can't believe it, he whispered one evening, feeling the flutter of tiny movement beneath his palm. Believe it, Amina said softly. You're going to be someone's father. He stared at her at the way the firelight danced across her skin and knew he already was. It wasn't just the baby. It was the way he listened now. Slower, deeper. The way he talked about leaving studio pressure behind and writing something real, something his child could be proud of. Amina, too, began to dream aloud. Of a restaurant, one with open windows and spices from her grandmother's recipes. A space that told her story, not someone else's. For the first time, they were building, not reacting. But just as they began laying the foundation of something real, the past was already catching up, knocking at their door. Weeks passed. The world moved on, at least on the surface. Noah began drafting a screenplay, not for money, not for fame, but for truth. It was a story about legacy and silence, inspired by the one growing in Amina's belly. Amina flourished in the coastal stillness, her cheeks fuller, her energy stronger. One morning she surprised Noah with jollof rice, her grandmother's recipe. He took one bite and smiled. You have to open that restaurant. She laughed, but then her eyes turned serious. I will, but I want to build it my way. With my hands, my pace, no shortcuts. I'd never offer you a shortcut, Noah said. Only a head start. Still, she refused his money. Not out of pride, but out of principle. She had fought too hard to build herself without being someone else's project, even his. And he admired her all the more for it. Then came the knock. It was Eleanor. She stood on the porch in designer wool heels, sinking slightly into the coastal earth, her expression unreadable. I just want to talk, she said. Inside, over tea, Amina made out of habit, not hospitality, Eleanor spoke in perfect clipped phrases. The family is concerned. You and Noah are making choices that have consequences. We want what's best for everyone. Then she made the offer. $5 million in exchange for silence, discretion, and distance. Amina said nothing, not at first. She just stared at the woman who once called her the help. I'm not for sale, she said quietly, and neither are my children. Eleanor didn't argue. She simply left her business card beside the teacup. Think about it, she said, before the real consequences arrive. But the consequences wouldn't wait, because what neither woman knew was that Amina's body had already begun sending warning signs of its own. It started with headaches. At first, Amina brushed them off. Then came the dizziness, the swelling, the blurry vision. Noah noticed. Of course he did. One night she dropped a glass. It shattered on the kitchen floor, and so did the illusion that everything was fine. They rushed to the nearest hospital 2 hours away. Monitors beeped, nurses moved fast, and a doctor with two serious eyes used words like preeclampsia and dangerous blood pressure levels. She needs to deliver, the doctor said. Now, but she's only 32 weeks, Noah protested. She may not make it to 33? Time bent. Everything moved too fast and too slow at once. Noah held Amina's hand as they prepped her for emergency surgery. Her eyes searched his calm and fierce all at once. Promise me, she whispered, you'll fight for them. Even if I can't. You're not going anywhere, he said, voice cracking. You hear me? You stay. But she was already slipping under the anesthesia. The delivery was fast, too fast. Two babies, tiny, fragile, rushed into incubators, and then the bleeding wouldn't stop. Noah paced, prayed, bargained with a God he hadn't spoken to in years. The nurse finally emerged exhausted. She's stable. But she won't be able to carry again. The uterus had to be removed. Noah didn't speak. He stepped into her room, saw her pale but breathing, and collapsed into the chair beside her. He took her hand, and for the first time in his life, he cried, not for himself, not from fear, but because he loved someone so much, the thought of losing her had broken him. She stayed, he whispered. You stayed. He looked at the two tiny infants behind glass and knew his life had just begun again. But the world wasn't done testing them yet, because the Kensington family had plans of their own, and this time they were coming with lawyers. The hospital stay blurred into a series of beeping monitors, soft cries, and late-night feedings. Amina was healing, slowly, steadily. Their twins Zara and Zayn were fighters just like her. But outside that quiet bubble of love and survival, a new storm was brewing. Lawyers came knocking. Eleanor this time didn't ask, she demanded. The board is calling an emergency vote, James said, smug in his navy suit. You've embarrassed the family. The press is relentless. Investors are nervous. Noah looked at the paper in his hand. It was formal, brutal. A motion to remove him from the Kensington Foundation Board and to cut him off from all trust assets pending conduct review. This is legacy, James sneered. Not some passion project with a chef. That was the moment Noah stopped being polite. That evening, Noah called the same news anchor who'd hosted his first interview. I'm ready to talk, he said. All of it. The next night he sat under studio lights again, but this time not as an actor or a scandal. He came as a son, a father, and a man who was done hiding. My name is Noah Kensington, he began, and I want to tell you what legacy really looks like. He talked about Amina, about love, about nearly losing her. He spoke about how his family had traded dignity for image, about how the Kensington brand was built on controlling narratives and erasing people like Amina who didn't fit the mold. He named names, cited board memos, played recordings of conversations with PR strategists that reeked of racism and manipulation. It was raw, brave, dangerous, and it went viral overnight. The public, once split, now rallied behind him. Hashtags trended, interviews booked, young black chefs reposted Amina's recipes, parents called their kids over to watch the man who stood up for his family, not his fortune. And while the Kensington board scrambled to do damage control, Noah and Amina prepared for something far more powerful than headlines their future. 3 months passed. Spring crept along the Oregon coast, bringing with it green shoots, longer days, and the quiet rhythm of new beginnings. Zara and Zayn had grown stronger. Their cries now filled the cottage with life, their tiny fingers gripping a future no one could take from them. Amina stood at the kitchen counter scribbling menu ideas in a leather-bound notebook. Noah sat nearby reading a draft of his new screenplay, not about superheroes, but about something far more radical: honesty. The Kensington board had voted. Noah was officially removed. The trust fund was frozen, his name scrubbed from press materials. And yet, he had never felt freer. Together, he and Amina launched the Zara and Zayn Foundation, focused on supporting single mothers in the culinary arts. They funded scholarships, opened kitchens, and turned media noise into nourishment. Amina's restaurant, Salt and Grace, opened quietly on a street corner in Portland. No velvet ropes, no press frenzy, just good food, rich spices, and the laughter of people who felt seen. Noah hosted story circles in the back of the restaurant. Film students, writers, young creatives of color who had never been in the same room as someone who once walked red carpets. And every Sunday they closed early, for rest, for family, for joy. They were no longer chasing legacy. They were living it on their own terms. And when Eleanor finally visited unannounced, she didn't wear fur or heels. She held her grandchildren gently, looked at Amina, and whispered, "You made something beautiful." It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. Still, one story remained unfinished, one truth not yet told, and Amina was ready to tell it, in her own voice. The room was small, intimate, just 24 chairs and a microphone on a simple wooden stage inside Salt and Grace. It was Voices Night, a monthly tradition Amina had created where women could tell the stories no one ever asked them to share. This time they asked her to speak. At first she hesitated. She wasn't an actress, not a celebrity, just a woman who had once been invisible in someone else's mansion. But she stood up anyway, hands steady, eyes full. "My name is Amina Blake," she began, "and for a long time I believed love had to be earned, that I had to shrink myself to be chosen. That silence would keep me safe." She paused, let the truth sit in the air. I was wrong. She spoke of the night she cried alone in kitchens where no one said thank you, of the moment she realized her worth was not tied to any man's last name, of how she nearly died giving life and chose to live louder after. "I didn't need a millionaire to save me," she said. "I needed him to see me. And when he finally did, we both became better." In the back, Noah held Zara on his lap. Zane tugged gently at his shirt, already bored but smiling. Amina looked out at the crowd, not down on them, not above them, but with them. "I share this not because it's perfect," she finished, "but because someone out there needs to know you are not too much, you are not too late, and you are not alone." Applause rose, not loud, but steady, the kind that wraps around you like warmth. And for the first time in a long time, Amina didn't feel like a secret. She felt like a story worth telling. Because the real legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build when no one's watching.